All right, good morning. Quick notes. Tomorrow I have to give a PSAT test for 10th grade, so I will not have an actual class. I'm going to have a worksheet posted. I'll have it posted by 7:30 tomorrow morning. So no class for new material tomorrow. However, I will have a worksheet posted for you. Any questions on the homework? Remember, you just had to do two circle graphs. Two circle graphs.
Okay.
Okay. Make sure you get that turned in. By the way, I still don't have a test from Soraya or Nathan. I do not have your tests. Those will turn into a 0 if I don't have them by the end of the day. I need your test. I need your test. That's not your class. This is your class right here. So let's see. We're gonna do 12.3a today. I said tomorrow we'll do a review. Then we'll jump back on the bandwagon for Thursday, Friday. You'll come back on Monday. We'll be face to face. You will be taking your CMAS test on Monday or Tuesday. One day it's two tests. One day it's one test. I forget which is which. It will be full day classes, and then we'll just jump right through chapter 12 point, or the rest of chapter 12. Notice at the end of the 3 weeks here is when our chapter 12 test is on. That very next week, starting on that Wednesday, the week that's not shown here, that's when we start our semester final review. So there's only a few extra classes there. I call them pre-algebra prep classes. So it's additional information in our book that's really cool and interesting to learn in 7th grade. It's just not part of a chapter. Chapter 12 is the last chapter of the test, or last chapter of the book. And then that final week, that Monday through Thursday, will be semester finals, just like it was at Christmas time, right before we went on Christmas break. So it'll be half days each day. You'll take one or two tests every day, then go home, study for your finals. And then that last day on that Friday, that's for makeup in case somebody misses a test. All right, here is your homework. Notice it says just calculate mean and median. Maybe that makes sense to you right now. Maybe it doesn't, but it will by the end of the class because I will explain to you what that means. So I'm flipping the page here. It says to calculate the range as well too. We're just going to be doing mean and median. Range is simply what is it from the biggest number to the smallest number? In other words, big number minus small number. That's the range. There is a button on your calculator to do this, both mean and median. However, I'm not going to tell you where that button is. If you'd like to Google your calculator, by all means, make yourself smarter, figure out where the mean and median button is. I encourage you to use your calculator to get to the answer here. However, you will have to be able to do it by hand. But the sooner you figure out where the mean and the median button is on your calculator, the smarter you guys are going to be. You just can't use it on the state test for that one. They're just going to give you a 4-function calculator. So you will not have the mean and median button for your state test. You get to high school, yeah, it's absolutely there. That's why I would encourage you, hey, yeah, it has a mean and median button. Figure out how to use it. We get back face to face. If you'd like me to show you on your calculator, I'll show you. Okay, everybody good? Ready to go? All right, here we go. Mean, median, mode, and range. Mean, median, mode, and range. All right, the last few classes we've been dealing with this thing called data. And remember, our book defines data as numerical information about things. And I would just have a bone to pick with the book because next year they say both numerical and non-numerical information about things. So data can be, hey, what's your favorite color? That's data, right? Just this year, we're only dealing with numbers. Next year, we'll do some non-numerical information, but not this year. Often you'll hear people talk about what is the average of something. Hey, what's the average height of a 7th grader? What is the average test score of Mr. C's 4th period class? That sort of thing. We use this word average. Well, it turns out that average is not really a math word that we use with some precision. In other words, when you ask a mathematician what is the average, they're going to ask you, well, which average do you want? Because there's multiple different averages. Today we'll be learning about 2 of them. right? So for instance, the average number of students in each one of my classes, right? And the most common price paid for a house in Colorado Springs. In other words, what's the average cost of a house in Colorado Springs? What's the most frequently used jersey number for quarterbacks in the NFL? What's the average number of a quarterback in the NFL? All three of these use the word average, or what's the common, right? However, these are three different calculations entirely. One is a mean, one is a median, and one is a mode. And there are three of these, and hopefully this isn't the first year you've encountered these three words. Although some of you, it may be one or two of them you've never encountered before. So we'll do this nice and slow, and we'll talk about each one individually. All three of these averages are something we call measures of central tendency. Big long word, big fancy word. What does it mean? It means to find the middle. That's the central part of the data. So I have a data set, and it might be hundreds of numbers, and I want to find the middle, right? I want to find the average. These three that we'll learn today, that's what they do. They find that average, right? The difference is the word average is not precise enough for math. So we're going to have three different types of averages. Three different types of averages. Okay, quick note, there are three of these middles I just stated. This year, you're going to learn about two of them, mean and the median. Next year, you're going to learn about the mode. The mode is that last one. Hey, what's for instance, if you were a shoemaker like Nike and you were building shoes or something like that, you want to find what's the most common size shoes. That's an average, right? That's called a mode, and you'll learn about it next year. All right, so now we've come to what needs to be in your notes. So the first thing is going to be it's called a data set. So a data set is it's numerical information about a topic. Data set can have one number, it can have a million numbers in it, or anywhere in between, right? Anywhere in 0 to infinity type thing. Usually the data sets that you'll have tonight for homework, I'm looking at homework, with the exception until you get to questions 13 and 14, most of the data sets have 2, 4, 6 numbers. Some of them a bit more, some of them a bit less, but most of them about 6 numbers. So our data sets are going to be fairly easy. They're not either really large or unwieldy. 6 numbers, you can do math with those 6 numbers pretty quickly. So those are going to be our data sets. So here's a data set right here. Notice a data set doesn't necessarily have to be in any order. It's just a random string of numbers right here. Somebody just sent me a message. I was reading it. The data set is, the numbers don't have to be in any specific order. They're just numbers, and we're told that they have some meaning. So for instance, maybe these are your average, I don't know, first 2 digits of your telephone number, right? There's your data set type thing. All right, so think about this. When we talk about average, the middle, a lot of times we think about a scale, like I want half of the numbers on one side and half of the numbers on the other side. Well, that becomes a problem when we do like some adding, subtracting, right? Because the numbers are either going to be large or they're going to be small. So sometimes we have to use a different type of average, and that's kind of what today's class is about. So if we think about where is the middle of these numbers, we want half on one side and half on the other side. So, I mean, how would you do that? So today's class is on those 3 middles. So the first one we're going to do, the middle, is called the mean. And it's the exact middle of the data. I mean, literally the exact middle. And how do you do it? Well, it takes the data, divides it into 2 parts. Your answer may or may not be part of the data set. Like, we're going to get a number, and that number that we get as an answer might not even be one of the numbers in the data set. Go figure, right? And this is what most people mean when they say, hey, tell me the average. So for instance, what's the average height of the 7th grade, right? Well, this would be the process. When you do this process, you are in fact calculating a specific average, specific middle, something called the mean. Now, I haven't told you how to do it yet. Most of you probably know this. I got to type something. So this is what most people mean when they say calculate the average of the data. All right, so that's a lot to write down. I want you to remember it's the exact middle of your data, exact middle of your data. Okay, so let's talk about how this is done. Let's talk about how this is done. So there are steps, and this is the one that I will pause on. There are steps to calculate the mean. Step number one, you take all the numbers of your data set and you add them up. Ugh, boy, that takes some time. You know, if there's 26 numbers, you're adding 26 numbers up. Okay, with a calculator, not too bad. By the way, your calculator does have a mean button. It'll do it all for you. It knows these steps. All right, once you have all the numbers added up, you're going to count how many numbers are in the data set. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, there's 6 numbers in the data set. And it doesn't end being mean because step number 3 is you divide those two numbers. In other words, you add up all the numbers. It's going to be a really big number. And then you divide that number by how many numbers are in the data set. That's what step 3 says. Divide the sum of the numbers by the number of the number. Oh my word, that's a lot of that. This is what it means though. So you're going to divide the sum of the numbers by the number of numbers in the set. So in other words, divide step 1 by step 2. Step 1, add up all the numbers. Step 2, add up how many numbers you have. Step 3, divide 1 by 2. You will spend the most of your time on step 1 and step 2. The process is simple in the sense of what to do. It's the doing it that requires, well, a lot of scratch work. If I give you something with 20 numbers in the data set, I won't. Then you're adding up 20 numbers. All right, I got about 5 people live. So, oh, sorry. So those people, are we ready to move on? I know the people that are watching this not live can pause the video and write.
Almost done.
Okay. If you want to write step 3 in a better language, you can. I mean, what's in parentheses there is what you're really doing. Divide step 1 by step 2.
Okay, done.
Okay, so I'm going to show you just a quick example, right? Here's a data set. I don't know what the data set is of, and in this case, it's not that important. We're just looking at numbers, and we're asked to calculate the mean. So to calculate the mean, literally, we got to stack the numbers and add them, right? And then we're supposed to divide it by how many numbers there are. Well, that's the easy part, just counting how many numbers. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 numbers. So I'm going to take all of those numbers, add them together, and then divide by 9. Now I'm leaving out the part that where I'm stacking the numbers and I'm adding. I mean, I'm literally doing that. Could you do this in your head? Well, I don't know. Maybe some of you can, but I can't, right? Let's see. 17 and 10 is 20. Don't do this in your head, right? Stack the numbers and then add them up, right? Turns out, I'm just doing an example here, that when you add up all of those numbers, you get 108. I'm leaving off the part where you've stacked the numbers and you add them, or you grab your calculator. Now remember, you're going to have to be able to do this by hand on a test day. I said you could use a calculator on homework, but we're assuming that you're going to be able to do this all by hand. So maybe tonight for homework, you do a few of them by hand, a few of them with your calculator. Lastly, if you do find the mean button on your calculator, then remember all of these steps your calculator does for you. Like it adds all the numbers, it counts them, and then divides the two numbers. By the way, 9 goes into 10 once with 1 left over. 9 goes into 18 twice. So it goes 12 times. So the mean is 12. So the middle of the numbers, notice when I'm just looking at the data set, it's hard to see where the middle is, right? Turns out the middle is 12. And notice also 12 is not one of the numbers. It could be, but in this case, it's not. So the number that you get as an answer could be a decimal as well too. Could be repeating decimal as well. The number that you get may or may not be in the data set. So the average is 12. So for instance, if this was in your lifetime, the total number of cars that you will buy, some people bought 4 in their lifetime. One person bought 20. The average number of cars that these people bought were 12 cars in their lifetime, right? That's kind of what it would mean. All right, so we're going to just do one mean. We're not going to do a bunch of these because it is a mean calculation. All right, we're going to do one. This is kind of like what homework will look like, so don't panic. All right, so you have a small data set. There's only, what, 5 numbers here? There's 5 numbers. We have to add them up. So step number 1 is we have to add up all the numbers. Step number 2, you count the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you divide that. So we need some scratch work. So literally, like I said, you're going to be adding 23, 14, 18, 28, and 25 all together. And like I said, there's probably very few of us can do this in their head. So let's not do it by our head. 5 plus 8 is 13, plus 8 is 21, plus 4 is 25, plus another 3 is 28. So an 8 carry your 2. 2 plus 2 is 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 108. So I'm getting 108. 108 is what I'm getting. 108. We have to divide that by 5. So once again, scratch work. So 108. This one's not too bad. We like dividing by 5. Dividing that by 5. 5 goes into 10, what, twice? Subtract. We're left with an 8. 5 goes into 8 one time. Remainder 3. So we got to add a decimal place and add a 0. Drop down my 0. Ooh, 5 goes into 30. We like that. 6 times. I got 21.6. So the average of those numbers is 21.6. 21.6. 21.6.
What was the homework?
I don't know off the top of my head. Anyone lost on the process? Anyone lost on the process? Not necessarily fun, the mean. I always say, if you want to remember the mean, I say it's the meanest one, right? Get it? Meanest. It's the one that requires you to do the most math. All right, but that's the mean. That's the mean. All right, I don't want you to do this one. Just watch me do this one real quick. Let's see this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers this time. I add up all the numbers and I divide by 6. So our mean here, this one is a repeating decimal, so I have to round. Tonight for homework, let me see. I'm looking. Does it say? It does not say to round or not. So apparently all the math works out nice and friendly for you. All right, you'll let me know if that's not the case. Now, unfortunately for you, some of our numbers in our data set include negative numbers. So be very careful. Now this one, if all the numbers are positive or if all the numbers are negative, you can just stack the numbers and add them. So notice the numbers are a combination of positive and negative. This is like numbers 9, 10, 11, and 12. We got some positive and negative numbers. You got to be very careful. Unfortunately, I said this is the meanest calculation. When you have a combination of positive and negative numbers, you're going to have to go from left to right and add. 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 plus 3 is 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. 0 plus 4 is 4. 4 minus 6 is negative 2. And negative 2 plus 7 is positive 5. That's a lot of work. By the way, that's not the answer. That's just what all the numbers add up to. Now I have to divide 5 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have to divide 5 by 7. But I want you to show you one more time. When I add these numbers, I'm going from left to right, from left to right. 0 plus 1 is 0. 1 plus 3 is 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. 0 plus 4 is 4. 4 minus 6 is negative 2. Negative 2 plus 7 is 5. 5 divided by whatever we got there. 5 divided by 7 is 5/7. It's a decimal number. I got to do some rounding there. I only gave you a couple of these, so don't panic. Most of the time when you're doing averages or means, the numbers are always positive. All right, we good to go on mean? We're doing 3 of these today. All right, second concept, average house price. Imagine this. If I open up, I don't know, went online to real estate in Colorado Springs and I looked at houses And I looked at a bunch of them. I might get numbers like this. Their house costs 200,000, or a house costs 400,000, or 350,000, or 250,000. Right? If you had all of these houses right here, and you had that one house all by itself that was this big, huge honking mansion, and it cost $6 million, and I asked you to calculate the average of these house prices, well, you'd add up all the numbers, you divide by how many numbers, and we would get this. And think about what this answer is. By the way, I did this correctly. This is the average of all these numbers, and the mean, I should say, of all these numbers. We got 1,142,000. So generally speaking, when someone says, what's the average price of a house in Colorado Springs, and you literally were to use the mean to do that calculation, you would say that the average price of a house costs $1 million. Well, that's not true, right? The average house price is not it means like the price that you will encounter the most is $1 million. Well, that's not true. And the reason why it's not true is because of this one silly number right here. In math, when you have a data set and one of the numbers, just this one I circled, is really different than any of the other numbers. I mean, it's really different, right? It's way bigger. We call this number an outlier, right? It's a number that lies outside the range of all the other numbers. And when you have an outlier and you calculate the mean, you get really weird answers. Someone moving to Colorado Springs and you said, yeah, the average house price is $1 million, would immediately say, well, I can't live in Colorado Springs, right? It costs too much money to live there. And that's why mathematicians a long time ago came up with a way of dealing when you have outliers, numbers that are very different than the other numbers in your data set, right? It's a second type of average, and it takes care of when you have outliers, and it's called the median. So the median is also defined as the middle number. It also divides the data equally into two parts, right? And we use it, and it's the last thing here, we typically use it when we have weird numbers. And by weird numbers, they don't talk about the word outlier. They don't talk about the word outlier. Outlier, O-U-T-L-I-E-R. I can't write with my finger very well. Outlier, but that's the word for weird number. Outliers are numbers that are very different than the data set. Also, that middle bullet point right there, it says that outliers may or may not be in the data set, right? Mean, usually the number is generally not in the data set. And median, sometimes the number is in the data set. And it's not really that important whether it's in or not. But I just want to point out that sometimes for both mean and median, you're going to get an answer that's not one of the numbers in the data set. And that's perfectly fine, perfectly fine. All right, there's a lot to write there. Median. The book in 8th grade, they make it a bit larger point, but in 7th grade, they don't. But we're going to use the median when we have outliers in our data. Tonight for homework, they're not going to say which should you use, mean or median. But in 8th grade, they eventually do. But 7th graders can handle this concept. If you don't have an outlier, you use mean. If you have an outlier, you use the median. The median will get rid of those really weird numbers. The mean will not. The mean will calculate that weird number in the data set.
So for like all of them, we have to calculate the mean, but if there's a crazy one, we do median?
Yeah, well, see, that's what they should say. If I were writing the book, that's what I would do. But our book doesn't say that. Our book just will say, I'm looking at the homework here. It says calculate the mean, the median, the range of the data set. So it's going to ask you to do all of them. But you are right in sense of if there is a weird number, you're going to do the median. If there's not a weird number, you're going to do the mean. That's what common sense would tell you you're supposed to do. All right, watch me do one. All right, here. Let's write the steps down. Here are the steps, and the first step is the hardest one. You're going to write the numbers in your data set from least to greatest. So you're going to take the numbers, and you're going to write them from least to greatest. So smallest to biggest. Believe it or not, that's the hardest part of the process. What typically happens is someone makes a silly mistake. So somebody leaves off a number. Boy, will it mess things up. So we're going to write the numbers from least to greatest. Step number 2, whatever the middle number is the median. Now I'm going to have to show you what to do there, but that is actually the step. You find the middle number. Now it doesn't have much detail there, but the process is pretty simple. You find the middle number. If there is no middle number, you're going to take the 2 numbers that you're left. This makes more sense when we do it. Just write down the steps. If no middle number, take the middle 2 numbers and take their average. In other words, take their mean. If you've never done a median, this sounds really crazy and complicated. It's not. It's pretty simple. If you have done a median, then you kind of always remember how to do this. Those are the 3 steps to calculate the median. I'll pause to give you time to write this down. Step 1, you put the numbers least to greatest. Step 2, you find the middle. Step number 3, if there is no middle number, then you take the average of the 2 middle numbers. All right, we good? Danny, have you ever done a median?
I think so.
Yeah, you should have. Usually it's a 6th grade thing. All right, so here's your example. So it's the same data set I used before. So here's my data set. I have a bunch of numbers. This is not the one where I'm adding anything or anything like that. It's pretty simple, but the hardest step is you have to write the numbers from least to greatest. That's step number 1. You write the numbers from least to greatest. Here's my recommendation. So I go down the data set until I find the smallest number. It looks like what? 4 is the smallest number. Cross it out and write 4. Repeat that process. What's the next biggest number? It looks like 10. Cross it out, write 10. Continue that process. Next biggest number is 11. Oh, I got 2 11s. So I need to write 11 twice. Cross them both out. Oh, I screwed up already. See how easy that was? I skipped 8. I skipped 8. 8 would happen after 4. I didn't even intend to make that mistake. I actually made that mistake. I did catch it though. The biggest mistake is you'll skip a number. Now, the reason why I didn't make a final mistake there is because I'm crossing them out. And that kept me from making a silly mistake. The next number is 13. Then 14. And then what? 17. And finally 20. And I also will do one extra thing at the very end, is I will count the numbers. Just to make sure I didn't leave one off. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Because sometimes, I'll cross things out and I'll forget to write them down. So there better be 9 numbers here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are. Cool. So that's step number 1. I write them from least to greatest. Step number 2. Now I'm going to make this nice and pretty now. Step number 2, they're nice and pretty. Look at that. Step number 2 is we find the middle number. Here's how you find it. This is how you're going to figure out whether you remember doing this last year or not. You cross off the smallest, you cross off the biggest. You cross off the smallest, you cross off the biggest. You cross out the smallest, you cross out the biggest. You cross off the smallest, you cross out the biggest, and you'll be left with one number. Look at that. That is your middle number. So the median is 11. Why are you not clicking? Oh, because I actually crossed. Well, I guess I should review this more often. 11 is your median. 11 is the middle number. Now, like I said, if one of these numbers, let's say, going back to my original example of houses prices, if that last number there was 2 trillion or something like that, it would have gotten crossed out first. And that's why this one gets rid of those outliers, because the outliers are either really small or really big. If we were doing a mean, we would have added all these numbers up, including that 2 trillion number, and we would have gotten an average that just wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. So we use medians when we have outliers. All right, now we do have this nasty step 3 here, which we didn't use, which says that if you don't have a middle number, use the 2 middle numbers. So here's how that happens. If you have an odd number of numbers, we had 9 that time, you'll always get a middle number left over. But if you have an even number of numbers, well, watch what happens. Now I'm going to have an E 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I have 8 numbers, right? And when I do this crossing out, watch. Cross off the smallest, cross off the biggest, cross off the smallest, cross off the biggest, cross off the smallest. If I were to continue to cross out, I'd be left with no numbers. So on this one, this is what happens when you have an even number of numbers. You're left with 2 numbers, the middle 2 numbers. So let's see. Step number 3 says, if there is no middle number, there's no middle number, you take the 2 middle numbers, that's 11 and 13, and take their average. In other words, you add 11 and 13, that would be 24, and then divide it by 2. 24 divided by 2 is 12. When you have an odd number of numbers, life is grand, right? You just, whatever the middle number is, you're done. But when you have an even number of numbers, you'll be left with 2 numbers that you have to take the average of. Do you remember doing this now, Danny?
Nope.
Okay, well then this is brand new. So if you forget between now and the time you start doing your homework, I'll have the class posted within 10 minutes after class is, well, whatever the nearest half hour is, after class is posted. Then play the video to make sure that you don't mess up median.
Okay.
All right, any questions on what I just did there for median? All right, let's just do one, calculate the median. All right, let's see. Step number 1 says we're supposed to write the numbers from least to greatest, least to greatest. So let's see. The smallest number here is easy, 14. Cross it out. The next biggest number is 18. Hey, they're right next to each other. Look at that. Cross it out. Next biggest number is 23. Cross it out. Next biggest number, 25. It's really easy to do when there's only a few numbers. And then the last number is 28. I would still count numbers. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers. It just keeps you honest and from making a silly mistake. So the process of calculating the median is, well, let's see, we write the numbers from least to greatest. We did. There's nice and pretty. And then we start crossing things out. We cross out the smallest. We cross out the biggest. We cross out the smallest. We cross out the biggest. You're either going to be left with 2 numbers or 1 numbers. If you're left with 2 numbers, add those 2 numbers, divide by 2. If you're left with 1 number, then that's the median. Done. So the middle of those numbers is 23. Now it's a different middle than the mean, right? The mean, we're adding the numbers up and we're dividing by how many numbers we get. But for median, you're just literally writing the numbers from least to greatest and crossing numbers out until you get to the biggest one, or get to the middle one. The power of median is if you have an outlier, it gets rid of your you cross the outliers out in step number 1 or step number 2. Right? If you're doing a mean, right, the calculation where you add all the numbers up, well, you're adding up that big or that really small number, and it messes up your answer. All right, questions about calculating the median? All right, one last thing. So that was one where we had an odd number. Now we have an even number. One where we have an even number. All right, step number 1, smallest number here is 7. And then what is it, 11? Yep, then 11. Then what, 19? Then 22. Then 38. And lastly, 45. Cool. Least to greatest. This is like homework. There's like, 5 or 6 numbers type thing. All right, for the median, we cross off the smallest, cross off the biggest, cross off the smallest, cross off the biggest. You'll either be left with 1 number, or in this case, 2 numbers. I'm left with 2 numbers. When you're left with 2 numbers, you add the 2 numbers up. Scratch work. 9 plus 2 is 11, carry your 1, that's a 2, that's 41. And we have to divide 41 by 2. You will always be dividing by 2 for the median if you are doing any division. 2 goes into 4 twice, no left over. Drop down the 1. Ooh, 2 goes into 0, or 2 goes into 1 0 times. Decimal place, add a 0, 10. 2 goes into 10 5 times, so 20.5. 20.5. All right, that's what me with my sloppy handwriting, writing with my finger. Here's it nice and pretty using PowerPoint. We add 19 and 22 divided by 2, we get 20.5. Mean, no outliers. Median, you use with outliers. When you're doing the median and there's only one middle number, great, that's the answer. When there's 2 middle numbers, then add those 2 middle numbers, divide by 2. Questions? Okay. What happens when you have negative numbers? Well, this one's easier. There's no worrying about whether things positive or negative unless there's an even number. We still do the same process. Let's see, the smallest number here is not 0. Smallest number here is -6. The next biggest one is -4. Be careful with negative numbers. Remember, as the number gets larger, its value decreases. What happens if -4? Then we have a 0, then a 1, then a 3, then a 4, and lastly a 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 numbers. Cool. Now we simply cross things out. Smallest, biggest. Smallest, biggest. Smallest, biggest in C was no big deal. The median is 1. Why is it no big deal? Because with the exception of writing the numbers from least to greatest, we're not really doing any math. The only time you'll do math on median is if you have 2 numbers as your middle. And then you simply add those 2 numbers, divide by 2. So the median is 1. Median is 1. And that's it, believe it or not. It does say to calculate the range. We're not going to calculate the range. We're just going to do the mean and the median tonight for homework. Just the mean and the median tonight for homework. The negative ones are a little bit challenging. Let's see, numbers 10 and 12 and 14 are going to have some negatives in there. They're not challenging for median, they're challenging for the mean, because when you add the numbers, you're going to have a whole bunch of numbers. 14 is the one that has the most data points. It has 2, 4, 5. It has 15 numbers that you have to calculate for mean and median. So that one will take some time. All right, any questions on anything today? I'm going to go back to the calendar to wind things up here, just to remind you of what's going on for the next couple of days. That was a lot of slides. All right, so we're going to do a review tomorrow, so there will not be an actual class tomorrow, but I will have a worksheet posted. Then we'll pick things back up on if you're showing up live Thursday and Friday, and then you're going to come back on Monday. You're going to take your CMAS, and same thing on Tuesday, and then we will get back on Wednesday, and then we're just going to roll right to the end of the year. All right, you guys have a wonderful day. If you do need any help, send me a chat or something like that. I'll get back to you as soon as you can. It looked like period 1 was sending me like chat after chat after chat during class today, and they're like, "Hey, how do you do this number? How do you do that number?" They're actually 2 sections behind you right now because they've already taken their CMAS. You guys will be back on schedule with them after Monday and Tuesday. All right, have a wonderful day, guys. I'll see you on Thursday.